Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm reviewing the Korg SQ-64 polyphonic sequencer. It's a new hardware sequencer, a dark slab of awesomeness, of sequencing, of CV gate, of drums, percussion, of MIDI, of USB, all encapsulated in this fabulous slab of hardware. It's a hardware sequencer. 64 notes, 4 channels, 3 melodic and 1 percussive. Polyphonic on the melodic as well, would you believe? Which makes it a pretty damn versatile little box. Now, Korg sent this to me a week or so ago to give me the opportunity to put together a video about it, a review about it before it gets released. So that's pretty exciting. So hopefully I'll be able to give you an idea of what it can do, what's fantastic about it, and some of the things that perhaps aren't as fantastic. Now, I should caveat this by saying that all I've had is the Korg manual. Right, now if you're familiar with Korg products, you'll know that Korg manuals are full of really useful information on what everything is, but not a whole lot of information on what anything does. So I've had to kind of feel my way through it. And I don't mind that. That's kind of the sort of things I enjoy. So there may be things in here which I don't completely and fully understand yet. But hopefully the things I don't quite get will become clear over time. But in the meantime, I'm just going to show you what it does. It does that sort of thing. Sequences. Yeah, that's all it does. So out of the back, you've got a whole row of stuff. A, B and C. Those are your 3 melodic channels. For that, you get gate, pitch, modulation. For channel D, the 4th channel, you get 8 CV outputs. CV triggers that you can run through drum machines, drum sound sources, and other percussive things, or you can trigger whatever you like, of course. Now, channel D does have 16 percussive sort of sub-tracks within it, but the other 8 you would use over MIDI, over USB, that kind of thing. It has 2 MIDI out ports, as well as USB, and you can use all of those coming out of all the bits, or specific bits, you know, that kind of thing. Obviously, the polyphony side is only going to be present during MIDI. The CV gate outputs are not going to have anything to do with that. That's just kicking out one thing at a time. But in terms of MIDI, you can do 8 notes directly from here on each of the melodic tracks, going out to something else. Some MIDI device, to your computer, something like that. And so the SQ-64 sort of brilliantly ties all those things together. Your modular world, your software world, your hardware world, if that's what you want. Now, all the sockets are really annoyingly on the back of the unit. This is the same criticism I really had of the Arturia BeatStep Pro and the KeyStep Pro, is that it all pours out the back, which in some degree keeps the cables tidy and out of the way. It just makes them really hard to put in. So when you're patching, you always got to pick it up and look and say, oh, where's that got to go? Oh, I just find that so annoying. Why can't it come steaming out the top like normal modular? Everything just comes out of it. But no, it's all neat around the back. However, I would point out that each of these things has a little light on it. So when it's running, those are flashing, brilliantly flashing. Brilliantly flashing, it's showing you what's going on, and it's nicely, closely labelled, so it's not so hard. So it's not a major disadvantage. It was just, it's funny, when I spoke to Korg about this initially, the first thing I said was that, oh, I really hope you've put the ports on the top, and they went, oh, no, they're on the back. It's like, damn it. Still, never mind. It does keep this area beautifully clear. Now this, it's rock solid. It's amazingly solid, I have to say. It's very metallic, I think metal around the back. It's completely steady on your desk. It has 6 sort of paddy, spongy feet underneath, which means that's really, really not going anywhere. And so it's going to survive. I can absolutely see myself putting this in a bag, or even somehow sneaking it into the back of my mobile modular rig or something. I was really quite surprised at how sleek, how narrow, and yet how sturdy this thing is. It's been awesome in that regard. So I think we should just get stuck straight in. So let me introduce you to the front panel. 64 buttons, 64 pads or buttons, I'm not entirely sure. Buttons maybe, let's go with that. You can have all 64 all on at once. This is channel A that we're on, and in gate mode I can just turn on buttons like so, and there's my entire 64 step sequence all laid out. That by itself is something pretty fabulous. I hate having just 16 and having to page through different banks, although you can do that on this too, because if I release channel A from its selection, I've now got all 4 channels going at once. Look at that. And then when I want to see all 64, like on any other sequencer where you have your 16 steps at the front, I can go through with these bar buttons here. These buttons do not refer to the screen at all, although you've got a nice screen here with 4 things going on. It's nothing to do with these buttons. These are placed here purely coincidentally, nothing to do with that. The display here and the 4 things refers to these 4 knobs. That's important, or you'll get very confused and very frustrated early on in your playing with it. Anyway, back to A. Here's my 64 steps. I can set that running. They're all on the same pitch. It's running through something here. To give them pitches, I can go into pitch mode, select the one I want to give it a pitch to by pressing it, and then I can just dial in the pitch there. Go to another one, dial that in. And so on, you get the idea. I mean, dealing with 64 steps in this demo is probably going to be a little bit like hard work. So we'll go back to gate mode, rewind the steps down to about 16. And then we can see what it is that we can do with these steps and with these pitches. So you swap between a couple of modes: gate mode, pitch mode, modulation mode. Mod mode is what goes out the back of this modulation cable here that you can use to plump in to something else. Gate obviously turns the steps on and off. Pitch gives us the pitch information for that. Now you're sort of flicking between gate mode and pitch mode quite a lot, which can get a little bit laborious. Now they've done something to help with that, in that if you're in pitch mode and you turn on the add gate function here, that can be on or off, then whenever you press on a step and alter its pitch, it will automatically turn that step on. A few things you can do once you've got your 16 steps going. I can change the scale. I can transpose. Back in gate mode, if I hold a step, I can change its length, its offset, its probability, and its step division. So step division is ratcheting. Length can go from 100% into tying to the next note. So if I turn on the next note, it will legato itself into that. Alternatively, I can push that into sliding. I've also got a slide curve. The offset pushes it off the note. Either early or late. And probability gives you the likelihood of that note actually sounding. But there's another interesting option in terms of probability. You can actually get them to vary depending on which cycle you're on. So if I hold these three notes here, on probability I'm going to go to alternate. So on this setting, every other time it will come up. So if I put that to the same on these two, or three, so it doesn't play, and it does. Isn't that interesting? There's plenty of modes, like there's a 3 times one and a 4 times one where it only plays one, or it plays the third one every time. But it's a very easy way of suddenly making a 16-step pattern seem much bigger because it has that variation in there. Really interesting. I'm going to bring in the modulation track, which is taking the modulation out to my filter. Now this honestly seems to be more to do with MIDI than it does CV, because when you press on a note it comes up in a MIDI value. But all it means is that I can then change that down, and that will change the amount of CV going out of the modulation output. So that's now controlling the filter. You can hear that. I've got this going through this fantastic distortion module, which is just brilliant. It's from Kyobra. It's called the Barulo. Anyway, by the by, you can also change the curve as to whether it's stepping up and down or sort of sliding up and down between its modulation level, and how much it varies, I think. You can also rotate it around, which is going to make more sense when I've got some drums going, so I'll show you that in a minute. But essentially it means that you are changing where the modulation is happening. You can also do that with the notes, but again I'll show you that in a moment. And then lastly you have loop mode. Loop allows you to stick between, to set a little loop going on your sequence. Then you can change how much the randomization within it, which is interesting. You can also increase the speed, time division, and then when you resume, is it staying in phase with the rest of the sequence, or is it just free forming by itself? You can also select individual notes. If I come out of that, So these are our gates. If I go to loop, I could select a couple of notes, which is now looping just those notes, if that makes sense. Rather than a range, which I had before. I can just keep adding notes to it. Obviously they have to be notes that are already sounding, because this is a loop mode I'm in, not in gate mode. So let me go to channel D. D is a percussive one. I've got a couple of things set up here. So I go to my first sub track, which I can select on this panel here. I can then, so I'm on D now, I've got my first 16 steps mapped out here. Of course I can make that 64 steps if I want, but I'm trying to keep things simple. So let's put in some kick drums. Now I can show you what rotation means. So as I rotate, it's moving the sequence on one step at a time, so it's rotating round. So what was at the front then ends up at the back. Does that make sense? Now in here I could probably show you the division a bit better. Of course with everything you've got probability, you can offset things to give it a bit of swing, although of course we also have a swing knob. While we're keeping things simple, I'm just going to point out this section here, which are kind of like performance bits and pieces that allow you to change the way a sequence is playing. If I hold shift, I can do things like reverse. There's then bounce to make it go forwards and back again. On channel A. Can also make it do a stochastic function. Now that's quite interesting because it chooses a note either side, either two in front or one behind, I think, and then it makes it sort of way across in this strange way, and it's a fantastic method of creating variation because it's still playing the same notes, just doing it in a weird way, a wonderfully weird way. Obviously I can do that to the drums as well. Or you can make it random. So it's just moving about in a random way. You can change the time division on each track, so I can speed up A and slow down the drums. I could turn it into triplets. Not sure if that's good. You can also turn on polyrhythm mode so that they are free from one another in terms of how they loop and their timing. With that off, they're all going to start again after the longest loop has made it to the end. but that frees them from that. Resync is supposed to sort of sync the tracks back together again, because you can very easily find yourself all over the place. And that, I think, kind of resets them. I haven't fully worked that one out yet, I don't think, but that seems to sound about right. Other functions you've got is mute. Also, when you're on D, you can mute any of the 16 subtracks. Now there's one function here which keeps coming up on the screen which I've avoided up to now, and that's called fill. Now there's a reason for that, is that it's slightly confusing. All it says in the manual is that this fills in empty notes. Simple enough. But what does that mean? Well, it depends on what you're doing. If I go to channel A, if I mute out the drums for the moment. So as I increase the fill amount, it should fill in the empty notes. Except it doesn't. Now if I go to the drums and use the same command, fill, on that, absolutely does, and you can see how all the notes are being filled in and firing all together at the same time. So that's everything running. And the percentage just increases the potential of those notes firing and the amount that it's going to do. And for drums, it's a brilliant way of bringing in a fill, and that totally works. It's just that it doesn't out of A, B or C. However, it does work over MIDI. So this is now playing from the sculpt over here. And if I dial up the fill, it does fill out the sequence. But that's not what's happening with my modular over CV. And in some ways, that's quite interesting. So I've got these two things going on the same channel, and I can change the pitch of the ones which are currently not active so that they're playing something more than just that C. So some oddness there, some oddness in this fill command. Doesn't seem to work out of CV, does work CV over the percussion, but otherwise works MIDI and USB. Don't know what that's about, but it's quite a fascinating thing, and I really like it to be able to kick out CV as well on these normal tracks. Maybe I'm using a pre-release firmware, maybe there's some other update coming along, or maybe it's there by design. Don't know, because the Korg manual doesn't really tell you very much. It doesn't tell you very much. I know it looks like a thick manual, but it's all in different languages. So, you know, the English bit is just this little bit over here. And as I say, lots of really good information on what everything is, just very little information on what anything actually does, or how you actually do it. Still, never mind. While I have the MIDI plugged in, let's have a look at the polyphony side and associated paraphernalia. So we've had this thing here, the play mode, which is in chord, mono, or arpeggiating. Now, let me show you that. Let me use the MIDI sound source for this. I'll take the modular out of the story. So mono mode is easy enough. No problem there. Chord mode allows you to be in polyphonic mode, and then there's an arpeggiator sort of tacked on to the end of that, which you can hear being weird there, right? So let's try to explain that a little bit. So I'm going to kill this track. I'm now going to play some notes in. This is the other mode of entering notes. You don't have to do individual note pitch. Yes, you can in step mode, but if you want to do things in some kind of real mode, then you can turn this into a playable keyboard. Now I've got this set to isometric because I want to learn how you make isometric work. I mean, how do you do that? I'm trying to learn it. You know, you're going to have to bear with me on that. So to record in keyboard mode, I can put it in record, and it's going to go round its 16 steps, and I can just press something and it'll get recorded in. Nice, eh? So why don't I make this 32 steps just so we don't have to listen to that quite so much. So as I hold a button, it will tell me what chord has been entered. As you can see the notes here. 5 notes have been entered. If I go to my second lot, I think I only pressed 3. Yeah, 3 notes have been entered. Now I can edit these notes very simply and move along to the next one, move along to the next one. What I can't seem to do is add another note. I can't move to this empty space. You see there's 8 spaces in total for your 8 notes of polyphony. I cannot get to that extra note. I don't know why. It seems like an obvious thing to be able to do, just to dial in a chord in a step mode fashion, but I can't do that. The only way I seem to have found to add more notes to it is to record another chord in. It doesn't have to be in real time, can be in step time. So I can hold this, I can press another 5 notes or whatever. It doesn't show up on there until you press it again, and then there it is. So let's put in just 2, and there it is. Put in a different 3 over here, and there they are. So you can go to each step and completely change what's being played. See, as I've told you, I'm really good at this isometric keyboard thing. Now the other mode is arpeggiator mode. I have no idea what that's about. There's no information on it, there's nowhere to edit it. The only option you get is to change the rate to either super fast down to 1, which is still ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense. It does the same over CV as well. I don't know what that's about. I can't fathom that out. Maybe it's something that will be improved in the future. But suffice to say that chord mode works brilliantly, and so does mono mode. If you switch it to mono mode, it will just take the bottom note of whatever it was that you were playing. There's another mode which is control mode. If I turn that on, the whole surface becomes a MIDI control surface with knobs that send out controller stuff this becomes a keyboard in a very one note after the other kind of way, and other knobs do different control changes and bits and pieces. So you can work all of that in there if that's something that interests you. Not me, really. I prefer to do some sequencing. Now, there is a little bit of toing and froing between these different modes, which can make it perhaps, you know, feel a little bit cumbersome at times. You go to gate in order to turn on steps, and then you go to pitch in order to change the pitch of them. So if I bring this down to 36, so if I bring this down to 16 steps, I turn on the gates, then I go to pitch mode in order to hold that and change that about like so. You know, it's quick when I'm not bothering to take any time about it, but then if I want to add another note, I've got to go back to gate mode, turn the gate on, go back to pitch mode, and then dial that up. So although these modes, it's good to separate these things out because they are two different processes, it gets a bit laborious having to go between the two. Now, they have done something a little bit about that, which is this add gate option here. In pitch mode, if you turn on add gate, it means if there's a step that isn't on, I can press on it to set the pitch, and then the gate will automatically turn on for that note. That's probably the answer to all this faffing about. But if I want to get to the gate information, I've got to press gate. If I want to get to the pitch information, I've got to press pitch and then hold the note, and that will tell me what's going on. One other slight annoyance for me is that the shift key doesn't latch. Really like that to latch. The reason being is that all this stuff here, the reverse bounce, the stochastic and random, the muting stuff, the changing these things, these are great performance features, and I'd like to be able to turn that mode on and play without having to hold this down the entire time. I mean, obviously you just want to go bump, bump and do something and you're out again. Brilliant. But could I not have the option? Could I not have the option? For all I know, there's an option in here, but I haven't found it. And there are plenty of options, plenty of stuff behind the scenes, because, you know, that's the sort of thing that Korg like. They like these pages of parameters. You know, that's good stuff, really, really good stuff. They like that. And so there is a lot of stuff in there that perhaps would let you tailor it towards exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve. Shall we start with that and see if I can make something else happen? There you have it, the Korg SQ-64. It's a hardware sequencer. What do I think of it? Physicality of it, flipping amazing. Its size, shape, feel of it, it's fantastic. I love it. It stays on the desk, doesn't go anywhere. You could drop it and it's going to survive, although I'm not going to test that out at this point. It feels completely rigid and awesome to play with. The workflow is pretty good. I know what's happening. I was able to go through pretty much all of the features of it almost without referring to the manual, which is a godsend, I can tell you. But mostly, you know, putting in notes, holding a note in order to change either the pitch or the gate depending which mode you're in. Mode shift it's not the smoothest, but it works, it does the job, and you can very quickly build up monophonic sequencers with no bother at all. The polyphonic side of things is a bit trickier. I mean, you could plug a physical MIDI keyboard into this and record notes playing on a regular keyboard. You could do that, but the buttons here doubling as a keyboard, brilliant. It works in the majority of cases once you can wrap your head around what the buttons actually mean. I mean, there's 3 different modes of playing them. I was using the isometric mode that I'm trying to understand and learn, and that has its advantages and can work really nicely. So you can put in chords, you can play it more melodically, you can play in sequences, or you can do it a step at a time. It's entirely up to you. The editing is relatively easy, the screen is great. I'm not always sure that it's showing me the things I actually want to see. But through either holding a note down or holding shift down, you can get to most or all of the parameters that you need that are then editable on the 4 encoders. Yeah, it's a little bit of learning required, a little bit of working at it to work out, okay, how does this work and how does this work, how do I access that? But to do the basics of sequencing, it's really, really dead easy. I love the performance controls. I love what's under the shift button, the fact that I can do the stochastic thing, I can do randomizations, bounces, reverses. I can loop sections, just loop in a little section there, or do the fill on the drums is awesome. I'd like to know what on earth happened to it on the CV outputs. Maybe that's something that will happen at some other time, but I'm going to have to move on from that. The arpeggiator, I don't know, I've got no idea what that's about. Hopefully someone else will come up with a bit of an idea. Drum programming is easy, 16 channels or 8 channels, as I'm normally going to be using out of here, using the CV into stuff. I can absolutely see this staying here, working into this, because I can produce music with it. I mean, I did like little sequences within my modular. I mean, when I first started in modular, I got a Beat Step Pro because that's what everybody had and it seemed to be the thing to have. And I could not get on with it. I couldn't quite work it out. I was never doing quite what I wanted. I felt like I was fighting with it. I felt like I was back into using some kind of computerized device, which of course it is. It seemed to have a workflow that was much more like a DAW, much more like software than I wanted it to be. I wanted to just turn knobs like this. I wanted to turn a few knobs. That creates a sequence that goes into something. This feels more like that, somehow. Or maybe it's that I've evolved, I've developed, and my usage of sequencing within Eurorack has developed. Maybe that's a factor, and now I'm more ready for something more complex and something more involved like what this is. I love the fact I can see 64 steps laid out in front of me, and I can pick the one that I want to choose. I want to change. That's brilliant. Did I say it had 64 pads? That, I think, is completely awesome. Hopefully it will stick around and I'll be able to do some more videos on it at some point soon. Maybe there'll be a whole other section to this that I haven't understood or come across yet that I'll be able to do more videos on. Maybe arpeggiators in the future will be something fantastic that I can craft and demonstrate to you. And of course, I mean, I think I've answered the question about whether I'd buy this or the Beat Step Pro. I think this has more going for it. Definitely. It's smaller, more compact, rigid, 64 steps on show. I love all of that. Would you instead have the Key Step Pro? Because this has the same number of channels, 3 melodic, 1 percussive, I think, more or less. The same sort of outputs on the back. Much similar, except massively different in size. And of course this one does have a keyboard, and that has its advantages, most definitely. But at the expense of size, and you can do a lot of that on here with the keyboard mode. So it's an interesting one to juggle, I think. I hope I've shown what some of the interesting performance parameters are on this. The looping, the bouncing backwards and forwards and that kind of thing, and the filling. That's quite interesting. With the key step, you've got a lot of randomization in there. You've also got those sort of beat repeats here on the bottom. So, you know, both of them have those sorts of elements. But for me, I really like the way it's presented in the Korg. That's really working for me. And it was instant. It was there without me having to really work it out. I could just click on something and it would do more or less what it says. And there's plenty of things that I haven't gone into, like pattern changing, song construction, saving patterns to different places and putting all that together. So there's more to explore than I've even scratched the surface of. Slight weirdness aside in other bits and pieces, but on a whole, it's a very, very enjoyable and positive experience. So there you go. Hope that's useful. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.